How's that? How's that? Yeah, would you put this flowers on, maybe, I don't know, someplace else? Just any place else but there. Neil was not a religious man. He was a very spiritual person, but he didn't practice his religion, or in fact, he practiced mine more than he practiced his own. And I thought that it would really be inappropriate to try to have a religious ceremony at his death, because that's not who he was. So we're calling this a remembrance. If anybody wants to get up to speak, if they have a memory, a funny story, anything they would like to say, or not. But I wanted to start off because, and I hope that I can get through this. This dying has been a long process. It's been like really, I feel like it's like a hang glider just going around and around, spiraling down to earth. And so many times in the past couple of years, we thought, this is it. And the family gathered right away to see Dad for the last time, and he recovered. So over time, it's become like a twilight zone where we just didn't know what was happening or when it would happen. And Neil always said to me, I want to live to be 87. I want to make it to my birthday. And he fell 10 days short. But somehow, in my emotional calendar, I had penciled in February 28th, Neil dies. So I was really taken by surprise when I got the call on Sunday morning that he had died. Even though I've been with him every day and seen that spiral was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And it was hard to imagine how he was staying alive in the shape that he was in. He would not want to be there, and I'm convinced that I never told him that he was going to be at peak for the rest of his life. And I know that the staff would never say anything like that to him. And I really believe that in the past 2 weeks, despite his dementia, I think he finally was understanding, I'm not going home. And he just said, and I'm not staying here. So I was shocked when they called me. The message was very abrupt. Is this Mrs. Stapelman? Yes. Janet Stapelman? Yes. I'm calling to tell you Neil died. Oh, thanks. That was really my reaction. Oh, thanks for calling and telling me that. It was so abrupt, and I just went out and sat on the back porch and tried to process it, and called my sons, and we had a plan in place that I would call Ben and say, Ben, get your brother on conference call with us, and he would do that. So I'm sure that as soon as that plan went into play, that they both knew what the message was going to be. And then I let friends and family know, and the funny thing is that Sunday morning, well, that Saturday, I had a very productive Saturday, cleaning the house and shampooing the rugs, and I really felt good about all the things that I'd accomplished, and I woke up on Sunday morning thinking, I think I'll go over and spend a longer day with Neil today, because I've been going every day at the same time, between 3 and 5, spending a couple of hours with him. And I thought, today I'm going to go on and spend a little bit longer. I missed it. I should have gotten up earlier and gone over. But I also think that people choose whether or not they want their death to be observed by family. So, I think that he made his choice. But when I got to the nursing home, they had taken his roommate for a walk, whatever. His roommate was out of the room and the curtain was pulled around him. And I sat down with him and I took his hand. It was warm. It was just as warm as if he were still alive. Now, one of the things that I loved about him was he had beautiful hands. He had what I call Michelangelo hands. They were not fat and not thin, and they were muscular, and the veins were defined. He just had beautiful hands, physically. But beyond that, he had the healing touch. He really did. He had healing powers. And he did massage, and I was talking to one of his friends, the sculptor Tom Otterness, and Tom said he would go to see Neil for massage, and he would leave there with the pain gone from his back, but also the pain gone from his mind, because Neil would talk to him, and things would be resolved for him through knowing and having Neil's touch. Also, he was a hairdresser. I mean, he was just great with the scissor in his hands, and he did my hair for our wedding. So, as I was holding his hands, must have been maybe a minute, not more than 2. It was like everything just flashed through my mind, and that was the moment that in all of this twilight zone that I realized this is it. And his hands started to cool, and his fingernails started to turn blue, and so I put his hand back and covered it up. And last night, after everybody went to bed and I was sitting outside thinking about what I would want to say, the last thing that I want to say is that the first night that I spent with him 48 some years ago was a Saturday night. We woke up on Sunday morning, and I had a dream. And I said to him, I had the most wonderful dream. We had walked out of this dark forest, and we were holding hands and standing on the top of a hill. And out in front of us, there were fields and rivers and lakes and mountains. It's just this vast vista. And my feeling in the dream was, oh, I'm so glad I have somebody's hand to hold when I go out and explore this. And I told him that, And he just was staring up at the ceiling, and he said to me, well, that's what's going to happen. And that's what happened. And personally, I want to thank my family for their incredible support throughout all of this, and my good friends from the Y, who I know I can call on for anything, and you all showed up for me, and I never thought about it. It wasn't something that I ever thought about, but I was amazed at how much support there is for me. So I want to thank you all, and I love you all, and I invite anybody else who would like to come up to do so.
So I met Neil around when I met Ben, which would have been 7 years ago. And one of the first real conversations we had was his life, particularly through macrobiotics, and the influence that Michio Kushi had on how he viewed the world. So I thought it would be nice to leave you with a few words from Michio Kushi. So this is The Teachings of Michio Kushi, Volume 2. Everything is expansion and contraction. If we look through the glass of time, we see that all things are waving. Everything is flowing like a river. In a river, we see many spirals, which appear for a few moments and then melt into streams. The world of infinite movement is the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven's law is nothing but up and down, or yin-yang, yin-yang. Darkness changes into brightness. Brightness changes into darkness. Space changes into matter. Matter changes into space, and everything is waving. This back and forth is eternal law. There is nothing else but this infinitely moving stream.
My father had me when he was 49 years old. By that time, he had already lived a full life with many different phases. For me, he was always a supportive and loving presence. I remember being a kid and noticing that my father looked a little different than my friends' parents. He acted a little different than my friends' parents, too. And as kids like to do, my friends were not always shy about highlighting these differences. When I learned how to do math, I ran some numbers, and by my calculations, it seemed that I would be between 35 and 45 years old when my father would pass away. When you're a kid, it seems like a long ways away. But as I've learned, as we all learn, life goes by fast. My childhood was filled with my dad's pseudo-Zen sayings like, the price of freedom is responsibility, and every no gets you one step closer to a yes. At the time, they didn't quite make sense to me. It just seemed like old people like to say weird things, or you just try to have fun. But when you hear something enough, it tends to stick with you. These stuck with me, and as I got older, started to make a little bit of sense, and dare I say, even went on to serve me well when I opened a recording studio in Brooklyn, dealt with the constant rejection that comes with life, and specifically life in the music business. My dad instilled confidence in me to follow my own path, to trust myself, and stay true to what I believe in, even if it seems absurd to everyone else. He taught me this by example. After all, this was a man who calmly and confidently asked Dom at the legendary DeFara Pizzeria in Brooklyn to make us a pie without cheese. Blasphemy in many circles, but for my dad, this was just doing it the way he saw it. My dad was attentive and kind. He knew everyone by name. Sal at the hardware store, Ernie at the grocery store, Matthew at our local pizzeria. Down here in North Carolina, that might seem obvious, like that's just how it's done. But in a big city of 10-something million people, that level of awareness, humanness, and respect was rare, and it made an impression on me. My dad was a devoted father. The man basically gave up his life for us. He took us to baseball practices, tournaments, drove us from Brooklyn to Manhattan every single morning for school. When I started a band in high school, he helped book us shows, haul our gear to and from these shows, even on school nights. He introduced me to music. Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson, Pink Floyd. I'd say the Beatles, but I always think of them as my mom's band. My dad took me to Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert in Madison Square Garden when I was 6 years old, unknowingly providing me with a legitimate conversation starter that years later I used with my wife. Not bad. Thank you, Dad. The past decade since he and my mom moved down here has been full of medical emergencies, to the point that the unnormal started to seem normal. My dad suffered from congestive heart failure and COPD. As someone who spent a good portion of his life dedicated to alternative healing practices, it seemed to baffle him that he could not heal himself of these conditions. He hated being on oxygen and having to use a walker, and I'm not sure if he ever fully accepted it. Almost until the very end of his life, he maintained hope that he could get better, that he could heal himself. It was only in the past few weeks, as his mind went, and as he said, he couldn't put the full picture together, that that spark of hope and his unwavering belief began to fade. I'm grateful to him for things too numerous to recount here. And I'm grateful for all the time that I had with him. I'm grateful to my mom for being by his side, for all the love and care she gave him. I hope that this can give a little picture of the man that I knew my dad to be.
I learned many lessons from my father. I think he was the kind of person that everybody experienced differently. for me, he was stern, yet warm, strict, yet understanding. He was a dichotomy of personality. But one thing about him that never wavered was his complete and utter commitment to his family. There was never a time that I can remember where I needed my dad and he wasn't there. His loyalty and his reliability showed me the importance of showing up. Every game of baseball, every game of basketball, soccer, every school show or recital, even picking me up from the police station when I didn't know how to act when I was younger, he never missed a beat. He was always there, always in my corner. And he gave me the freedom to make mistakes and learn at my own pace without judgment. To take all the lessons that I learned and make with them what I would. Many of those lessons I didn't even know I was learning at the time. It wasn't until I became a father myself that I really began to understand my own. I try to show up every day for my daughter the way that my dad did for me. There have been plenty of times that I didn't want to. Early mornings when I wouldn't want to get out of bed, let alone get up and get a child ready for school. I'd think to myself, well, how important is school anyway? But then I would remember every morning that I'd wake up when I was a kid getting ready for school. My dad had already been up for an hour, making miso soup and oatmeal. And then I'd get myself out of bed and I'd get to it. Days where I wouldn't want to work, where exhaustion would try to wear the face of defeat. I would hear his words in my head and I would keep going. Because as well as reliable, my father was persistent. And I think that just watching him exist the way that he did showed me that anyone can defy expectations if they work hard enough. While the other kids, 35 to 40-year-old parents, were sitting on the sidelines, my dad was out there in the field, coaching and participating well into his 60s. He pushed himself mentally and physically, and he taught me to do the same. It takes 20 no's to get a yes, he used to tell me. His own way of saying never give up. Your handshake should mean as much as your signature, he would tell me. His own way of saying to always keep my word. I loved my dad very much, and I always wanted to make him proud. You're on to the next great adventure, Dad, and I will miss you. I hope that wherever you are now, that you are surrounded by peace and joy. You left behind a small piece of you and me, and in Ben and Eric and Mom, and in every life that you touched along the way. And I promise that I'm going to keep that piece of you in my heart, and that I will share it with Athena and pass on all of the lessons that you taught me. You will always be remembered fondly and with love. Rest easy, Dad. You earned it. Anyone else wants to talk? They're free to, otherwise I can go up there and pray.
How about my two nephews? That's a legacy that Neil has given us. Very nice. When Joanna first brought Neil to our family, I was a teenager, and he was slightly older. So he was my first brother-in-law, and I thought that was really cool. I had a brother-in-law. Well, I got older, and Neil got slightly older. And what happened was, instead of being a teenager and an older brother-in-law, we really became like brothers. And I would take the train up to New York, and Neil would meet me at Penn Station. And I marveled at how this boy from Brooklyn knew his way around Manhattan, inside out. He knew his way around Brooklyn. And he would pick me up at the train station and say to me, "It's 11:30. We're not going to take 34th Street. Excuse me, I'm going to get the streets mixed up." He would know how to navigate and get us to their house on Newkirk Avenue. And I enjoyed going to their house because it was always filled with fun, love, and laughter. And sometimes the laughter was inappropriate. Sorry, Ben. I just wanted to share one story about my memory about my brother-in-law. One time I came to visit, and they had a beautiful house in Brooklyn, large trees, and in the fall the leaves would fall and fill the gutters. Neil came to me one day and said, "Gary, will you please help me with something? We have these gutter covers. Would you help me to install them?" So we got the extension ladder out, and I would climb up to the ladder while Neil held it, and they snapped into place. I would move the ladder, and then Neil would climb up, and I would hold the ladder and snap some more in place, and it was going great until we got to the front yard. They had this huge bush that inhibited us from moving the ladder all the way to the right. So, me being taller than Neil, it was decided I would climb the ladder, and he would hold it, and I would reach as far as I could to snap the last gutter cover into place. And it was just out of reach. Neil says to me, "Hold on, I know what to do." And me standing up on the ladder, he disappeared into the house. Now, above me was the roof line, and I'm going to get this wrong. There was a gable with windows, and the window flew open. There's Neil at the top of this window, and he proceeds to climb out. "Neil, what are you doing? What are you, crazy?" And here comes Neil. Let's picture this, head first, GI crawling down the roof toward me, and I'm holding my breath. And he says to me, and I always remember this, "Don't worry, I do this all the time." Well, not to belabor the story, he made it to the end. He grabbed the cover, he snapped it into place, and he crawled back up to safety. So as we were discussing this, I had told this story to Ben, and his response was, "He used to do it all the time." That was Neil. Job well done. And you know what he said to me? "Let's go to the diner." Right? So we became like brothers. He was not a brother-in-law. I considered him a brother because he was something, and he will be missed. I know Janet said that Neil was not very religious, but I am. So I would ask you, let us pray. Eternal rest grant unto Neil, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen.